Welcome to Zero Trust World 2025 for our final day. This is day 3. CyberRisk TV is here, recording live from the Caribe Royale in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Adrian and Sanabria, and joining me to help kick off this third and last day is Paul Wagenseil. How are you doing, Paul?
Hello. I need more coffee, but I was up late. I was up late writing.
Yeah, such is the life of a writer. Inspiration strikes at 2 a.m.
I wish. So how was your conference been?
It's been here. It's been here mostly.
Oh.
I didn't get to see a lot of the session, so I'm going to vicariously live through you in the next 15 minutes here.
Okay. Well, there have been some interesting talks. Some have been controversial even. It's fun. I think there was one on the first day. This guy, Dr. Chase Cunningham, otherwise known as Dr. Zero Trust. He's got a podcast. He kind of came up with this whole thing, which is something that a lot of us have suspected, that a lot of cybersecurity is hype. There's no question about that. But he emphasized that a lot of things that can really help an organization beef up its cybersecurity are not things that need to be paid for, or that need to be, there's no plug-in solution for that. Among them, Zero Trust. Least privilege access.
What was the name of that talk? It was.
It was
something a little.
It was a little provocative.
It was provocative.
It was provocative.
Like the first line of it was
the grand delusion.
The grand delusion.
Why cybersecurity keeps failing and what works.
Yeah.
And he's got a blog post using the same title.
To give that at a vendor conference I was like, okay.
Yeah, he he alluded to that. He's like, I'm gonna get hate mail for this.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what he said held water. It's just that.
Well, clearly, revenue in the industry goes up like this. Attackers' success goes up like this.
Right.
There's something missing. There's something wrong.
And that dovetails into what ThreatLocker does, because their big thing initially was allow listing or whitelisting, however you want to refer it, which shuts down a lot of attacks. I mean, especially if it's involving novel malware or anything that's not involved, not on your approved list of applications. Now, that doesn't stop people from living off the land.
Yeah.
But then they got this thing called ring fencing, which kind of like
the network component.
Yeah. Well, what it does, it keeps applications sort of in their lanes.
Okay.
It's
more than network.
Yeah. So for example, like it's gonna like stop Word from directly reaching out to the internet or accessing PowerShell, because those are not normal functions for Word. It's possible to do that with Word, but it's not really something you would want to do on a day-to-day basis.
Word should not be spawning shells.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So Danny Jenkins of ThreatLocker was very proud that, according to him, and it makes sense, ring fencing shut down the SolarWinds attack for ThreatLocker customers, just because that used the SolarWinds Orion networking management software. The ring fencing stopped it from reaching out to the internet, because that wasn't part of its normal job.
And that concept's been around for since the 70s. We've been talking about like the principle of least privilege. The trick has been, okay, SolarWinds is one of 10,000 software products I have.
Right.
How do I then configure things like SolarWinds to only be able to go to update.solarwinds.com times 10,000? Yeah. Right. So how do we apply this principle, which we now call Zero Trust, is just another word for least privilege, right? Default deny, don't allow anything that's not absolutely needed at scale. And we saw companies like Bit9 in the 2000s even. There was the first wave of these hadn't solved that problem yet. So people would try and deploy it, and the pitch, I remember analysts saying, malware is not going to be a thing anymore, because we're only going to allow the applications to run that are allowed to run. And then, lo and behold, there's a maintenance problem. Yeah. The moment you deploy that, your CEO's angry, your developers are angry. A month later, you have 30,000 exceptions that you've made.
That's it. Yeah, they had a guy yesterday from ThreatLocker, Colin Ellis, talking about allow listing, just a whole session devoted to that, and how the principle works really well, but implementing it can be difficult for the reasons you mentioned. And so apparently by default, what the ThreatLocker program does is when you first install it, it doesn't do anything. It just waits. and observes. It watches your network.
Yeah.
It watches all your applications, and it just learns.
Yeah, you
by
can have it in
observation.
a monitor only.
Yeah.
mode. Yeah.
And then after a few weeks, it thinks it has enough to to move forward, and then it prompts you to you can start shutting down some things or blocking some things. But the best way to do it is incrementally, do certain groups at a time. So you might want to start with developers. They're going to be mad, but they're not going to be as mad as the CEO if you shut off their access to some applications.
Yeah.
So it's a slow process, but the idea is that you do it right and it'll work well.
And these principles work. We see them on our phones today. Our phone will say, hey, this app hasn't used microphone. That's a very sensitive privilege. We're revoking it.
Yeah.
And we can do that, or, Apple and Android and Google can do that because it only takes you 2 seconds to re-enable it.
Yeah.
Right? Like the moment you try and use a feature that requires the microphone, it says, you want to allow the microphone? You say yes. So it's easy to revoke things when it's easy to get them back.
Yeah.
When there's not a whole lot of friction to get them back. And like I was talking about, I installed the app for Zero Trust World. On Monday, I don't need that app anymore. It would have been great when I installed it if I could set a date for its removal.
Right.
Right? So these are kind of the principles that we're seeing in play here. Is even if you need a privilege, how long do you need it for? Are you sharing that file for the very next meeting? Do they need it after, an hour after the meeting? Share it for 24 hours maybe.
Yeah. It's sort of a just-in-time, access control.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little easier to do that on a mobile, mobile operating system, which is kind of a lot newer than Windows. And of course, Microsoft's whole thing is that you can run a DOS program in any version of Windows.
Yeah.
Legacy support forever.
Yeah, it goes back 30 years.
Which is nice, if you want to play your old CD-ROMs.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is an issue, and Microsoft has done a pretty good job of emulating old operating systems.
I thought you were going to say making money.
No, it's done a good job of making money, but so has Apple, and so has Google. I mean, I'm not going to blame anyone for that.
Right. Yeah.
There's no nobility in poverty in the information technology industry. But talking about Zero Trust, there was one talk that was actually pretty interesting, and it was a product pitch, but it was talking about Zero Trust email, which is something I hadn't thought about.
I haven't heard.
But there's a company called Mail Protector, I think, and their CEO gave a talk and said, look, SMTP is fundamentally insecure. It's an open standard. It's an open protocol, but because it was designed for the ARPANET, which was a closed network, you had to it was hard to get on that. You had to be affiliated with Stanford or Berkeley or MIT to use it. So you had to go through this verification process to get to the ARPANET, but then once you were there, you were able to use SMTP for any purposes, right? Now SMTP got ported to the open internet, so you've got an open network and an open standard
network as opposed to
and emails don't cost anything to send, so it's like you open your inbox, and 95% of what you see is crap, and you don't want to read it, you didn't ask for it, and as this guy said, within that 100 or so emails, there's going to be a couple of phishing emails or malware-related emams that you don't want to open.
So how are they applying Zero Trust?
So what they're doing is they're basically assuming all emails are hostile and unwanted, and then analyzing them and letting through the ones that they deem fit. Now, I'm sure you would lose some stuff on the way, but I think it learns after a while to let in what you want. It's an interesting concept. It really is. I've not looked at it, but
so spam filters that get trained by your behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's treated as spam first, and then you let things in.
Yeah. I mean, on my phone, I've been getting upwards of 70, 90 calls a day, and I just had phone calls. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, leaving 4-second voicemails. So my voicemail box is just filling up with all this garbage. Started about a week ago. And yet most phones now have an option where you can only allow it through if it's in your contact list. I most of these 70 to 90 I'm not seeing unless
it's a whitelist.
Looking at my phone.
Yeah, I mean you're whitelisting your
It's
calls.
an allow list. Yeah,
allow it, and that's I think what the email or Mail Protector is trying to do as well. That's an interesting concept, and it makes sense, and it seems obvious in retrospect, but I hadn't thought about it. Are these calls in English?
I haven't picked any of them up.
Okay, all right, yeah, because there was a wave of Chinese language calls that would just basically
because they're all on my local my Knoxville 865 area code, and it's a different phone number every time. So it's pretty obvious when they come through. I don't, maybe they'd stop if I answered one and yelled at somebody, but
no,
I don't know. So you saw some other interesting sessions. There was a, I understand, member of LulzSec, one that kind of turned on the anonymous crew and the LulzSec crew, and the guy that arrested him, giving a talk together.
Now they're buddies.
Interesting.
They have a podcast together now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's Hector Monsegur, formerly known as Sabu, and the guy Chris Tarbell, who's one of the FBI agents who busted him, and who also busted Ross Ulbricht. And so they kind of do a road show. They're friends. They give talks together. They have a podcast together. They're both gainfully employed as like cybersecurity researchers. And I think Hector
Ulbricht, the Silk Road
dude. Yeah. And Tarbell actually had an interesting comment about that. He said old me would have been pretty angry that he got pardoned, but he said, but new me hopes that he'll do some good with his talents.
He did. He did get pardoned right when Trump came in.
Because it was a nod to the cryptocurrency community. That was an interesting talk, and I thought it sounded kind of gimmicky at first.
And what was the focus of the
FBI agent? It was about actually they discussed Hector Monsegur's life of crime and how he got into it, and it kind of like it was interesting because he sort of just glided into it. He started being like he got an AOL account when he was 12. Found the Wares rooms, read the Hacker Manifesto, read the Anarchist Cookbook. Got into it, but he went through high school. I guess he had some trouble in high school because he got in trouble with the authorities for trying to fix a computer on the school campus. And he couldn't get a job in cybersecurity. He was like this kid with a
it was very early in cybersecurity.
This was like the
late 90s
or early 2000s.
Sounds like he's probably the same age as me.
And he's like, turns out he used to live a block away from him on the Lower East Side. He lived in the Reese houses on Avenue D, and he was unemployed, and he was trying to support his two nieces, who basically, I guess their mother was just out of the picture, and he was raising these two little girls on his own and trying to make money just that way. And he sort of slid into hacktivism. He got upset about the Navy bombing Vieques in Puerto Rico, and he got involved with Anonymous, and then he got involved with the Arab Spring, and these were all noble causes. And then it's turned into LulzSec, which to me was pretty entertaining, but of course it was totally illegal. And somebody flipped on him, and they found out he was in New York and combed through IP addresses and narrowed him down and knocked on his door. So he's gone legit since then, and he's got a job, and he's doing pretty well, which is great in the long run.
So is it more than just his story?
It's more than just his story. Sorry, I kind of dwelled on that. He gave a lot of interesting advice. He said, we talk about the sort of poverty line in cybersecurity. He didn't mention that term, but he talks about companies that can't afford to spend a lot.
Right.
Or don't have a lot of staff. He says, reach out.
Outside the Fortune 1000.
Exactly. It's like there's a lot of resources online that are free that can train you. There's a lot of tools that you can use. Leverage that, learn. You can get a lot done without having to spend a lot of money. Work with your vendors if you do spend something. Listen to your IT staff. And just reach out to each other. And his parting words were like, you're in this room together. You're all security professionals. Some of you may work for competing companies, but you're all facing the same problems. And if attacker's targeting one company, they're probably targeting your competitor.
There's not enough sharing.
Get together, talk, share information. That's a way you get ahead.
Yeah, and definitely products that do more things is kind of a trend that we've been seeing. And I just heard somebody excited about one of the Jenkins and Rob talking about some of the new features in the product, and they were super excited that they were talking about patch management. So certainly if you do have some vendors, it helps if they cover a lot of ground. because that reduces the overhead. So we hear a lot about platformization and
consolidation.
One vendor that does a lot of things, so you don't have to manage a whole bunch of different vendors.
But then, of course, you are putting a lot of your eggs most of your eggs in a single basket.
There's always pros and cons.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning, helping us kick off day 3. This has been great. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/ZTW for today's live stream schedule and coverage and other content related to Zero Trust World 2025. Thanks again.
All right.